and thanks very much for turning out, especially those who probably had a late one last night. I'm sorry to hear that quiz was so rigged, but you know, it's a great pleasure to be here. I made a commitment to my children about 2 years ago that I wouldn't do weekend work, because I work a lot evenings during the week and things like that. But when this came up, I made an exception, because I do believe that youth groups are a traditional solution to a contemporary problem. And I think, and I've said it, I write columns every week, I write 52 a year, and as part of my solutions, it's always, we need to bring back spaces for young people to gather. I keep saying it over and over again. And my editor said to me about 2 months ago, you keep saying that. And I was saying, well, I will keep saying it until it changes. And you know, an old teacher said to me once, you don't learn the Spanish verbs by hearing it once. You have to keep saying it, and repetition is key. So I'll keep banging that drum, and hopefully we'll see improvements and resources and the supports that we need for this to be something that becomes a much, much bigger part of society than it is already. So I'll crack on. I mean, there's never a good time to be a child, but there's certainly sometimes that are more challenging than others. And for me, I love this quote. It says, there are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen. And that's almost where we are at the moment. I gave a talk in March in Spain, and they asked me to repeat the talk again in October. And when I went back again to repeat it, the whole talk had changed, because even in that space of time, and again, it was about technology and things like that. Like, it took Instagram 2 years to get 1 million followers. It took ChatGPT 2 months to do the same. So from the point of view, this space is changing so quickly, and we're trying to keep up with it. And it's very difficult as people who are tasked with guiding young people through this time, because we don't know how to do this either, right? This is the first time we've lived in what's called a prefigurative society, which is basically the first time where the young are teaching the old, right? So before, we would have had something like a motor car, and you'd hand it down through the generations, and you'd say, like, you have to look after it, service it, don't speed, don't drink and drive. So you're handing it down with wisdom. But now we live in a world where we don't have the wisdom, because we're doing this for the first time as well. And it is a case that I meet parents all the time, and they say, Coleman, don't worry about us, we have all the parental controls in our house. Dara set them up. Dara's the 13-year-old who's setting up parental controls in the house. But we are in that time. So when we're struggling with this stuff, we should be, because there's no elders to tell us how to do it right. And so just because it's a struggle doesn't mean you're doing it wrong, or there's something out there that you don't know. And I've got to so many conferences like this thing, and I've spoken to all the world experts, and nobody has the answer. It's not, we're firefighting this stuff, because we're 15 years into the most significant social experiment of our time. And that's what it is, it's an experiment. This stuff is being introduced without any sense of its impact, and it hasn't been around long enough. And if you think about digital media, and I will talk about this because I think it's phenomenally important to what challenges we meet today. It changes how we communicate, how we learn, how we socialize, how we work, how we rest, how we play, and how we function. If there was a pharmaceutical company that developed a drug that affected all those areas of life, can you imagine the amount of tests and trials it would have to go through before it was released into the ether? Technology has no such need for any tests, and so it gets rolled out with no safe rails, no guardrails, nothing like it. And our young people are struggling as a result of that. And it's only in its infancy. The rise of Gen I and the metaverse is yet to come. You're familiar with the metaverse? The metaverse is basically, and this is where the youth club kind of gathering space, physical space thing is even more important. So as part of the metaverse, when we're going to this conference in 3 years, 4 years' time, you won't be here. You'll be in your room at home with a headset, and I'll be in my room at home with a headset, and we'll be communicating through avatars, which are those kind of, you're familiar with those guys. And I'm looking at your faces, going, yeah, right, yeah. The metaverse isn't for you. It's for the 14 and 15-year-olds who've been communicating through avatars since they were 7 years of age, through Roblox, Fortnite, buying skins, buying outfits, all that sort of stuff. So the tech companies are always a decade ahead of us. So from the point of view of, and if we don't want virtual headsets to be the means of how we look each other in the eye, that's why we need to hold on to the physical spaces and actually value them way more than we do. Young people, as I say, are the guinea pigs for this experiment, but it has had an impact on all of us. But here's the thing: since 2010, we've seen a consistent rise in the presentation of mental health problems. It's been like a hockey stick. It was always we've always had presentations, but since 2010, it's gone like this. And in 2020, 21, it took even a steeper curve up. That's not surprising because 2010 was the year the iPhone came out. Right? So from the point of view, it's very hard to cause and effect and say causation and correlation, and there's other things that play a part in this. There's awareness. People are finding symptoms, and that's another side of it. Like in terms of TikTok diagnosis, we have that stuff of, do you ever forget your keys? You've got ADHD, or do you like to put things back where they belong? You've got OCD. Like that's not helpful because that's mental illness promotion, not mental health promotion. Does that make sense? And so, but that doesn't explain the rise in the mental health problems, because what we're also seeing is a rise in young people presenting to A&Es after self-harm, suicide, or rise in eating disorders. So it's not just that people are pathologizing life, that's a part of it, but it actually is that we are experiencing more and more mental health problems. We're seeing rises in diagnosis of ADHD, ASD, all of these things. And so the landscape of people who are working with these young people have all of these needs and accommodations to try and negotiate. And it's becoming so complex to be able to do that. Because on one hand, we want to accommodate and become inclusive, but we don't want the service to become exclusive of children who don't have those needs. And you'll hear a saying, it's okay to not be okay, and that's very true. I always want to add an addendum onto that, which says it's okay to be okay.
Yeah.
Because I think that's okay. You don't have to have something like that. I remember going off a tangent already. I'm going to slides in. I went to a primary school, and there was a well-being coordinator in the primary school, and she was showing me around really proudly. And she said, "This is our worry wall." And I thought, very good. And she said, if kids have a worry, they put it on this post-it and they stick it on the wall. I said, that's very nice. And we walked a little bit further, and she said, "This is our worry bucket." So if they have a worry, they don't want to put it on the wall, they can put it on the bucket. And I said, very nice. And then we walked on, and she said, "This is our worry plant." And I said, whoa. I said, if I was a kid in this class and I wasn't worried, I'd think there's something wrong. So we need to be careful around that. And another example of that was my daughter about 2 years ago crying at home, filling out her well-being homework. And she's like, "I don't know what makes me happy, Dad, just that." And it's like, we've got well-being a bit wrong when we think it's about those things. They're window dressing, but actually well-being is what happens in person. It's about human beings, it's about connection. I went to visit a school last year, and it was a really leafy suburb, high-pressured academic school. But for the 6th years, they brought in an ice cream van, and it was an all-girls school, and they were all queuing up waiting for their free ice cream or whatever. And I remember saying to the teacher, that's the most important hour of their day. That just being there, having the crack, shooting the breeze, having an ice cream. That's way more important than the advanced maths class that they've just come from, or the biology class that they're going into next. But we're not valuing that. And I don't think parents are either, because when I bring that to schools say, well, the parents will say, how many CAO points do you get for a well-being class, or all that sort of stuff. So, I digress. But we need to acknowledge that as a society, we've never had more than we have now, yet we've never been more dissatisfied. Think about it from a calorific point of view, from a health point of view, from an entertainment point of view. We've never had as much as we've had, but from a self-satisfaction survey, we've never scored as poorly. Why is that? It's because we live in an expectation epidemic, right? Academics, sports, beauty, achievement is all pressure and expectation. I played sport all my life. I'd say I can count on one hand the amount of training sessions my father attended in that time. He was neglectful, he was a lovely man, just that wasn't the thing. I have 2 sons and a daughter, I could probably count on one hand the amount of training sessions I've missed. And I'm standing there at the training session going, why am I here? Why am I? Well, I'm here because everyone else is here and I don't want to be the one that's not here. You know, just that. It's like, and I don't blame parents. I think parents are trying to, it's like the party bag phenomenon. You know, after birthday parties you get party bags, right? And they've grown. You can see the party bag, the kids are leaving with a sack. and you're there and you're kind of going, why are they doing this? Like, it's putting pressure on the next person to want a bigger bag. But I don't think parents are going, I'm going to make a huge party bag because I want to be the best mom in the village. They're saying, I'm doing a big party bag because I don't want to be the worst mom in the village. Does that make sense? You're doing it to not be known as scabby rather than to impress. Do you know what I mean? But that expectation academic around sports and academics, beauty, achievement, the social comparison, obviously, like, social comparison is completely different now than it was before. Years ago, social comparison was about people on, like, celebrities, and you'd say, oh, look at their beautiful fireplace, but then you watch it on VIP or Hello magazine, you'd say, but they're millionaires, so that's fine. When you get a picture of Marion in number 59's mantelpiece, it's a different ballgame, because then you're looking at your mantelpiece going, Jerry, we could do it in that. So, the issue is that the social comparison that's level of people of the same ilk is much more potentially damaging than comparing up. Does that make sense? And so that means that children are not living in the same way that we would have lived. And the performative society of having a camera in front of you and recording every moment of your life and sharing TikTok videos and all that, they look like fun, but they're pressure. Ask any of the influencers who have to keep this content going and have to make up stuff every week and every day. It's not as easy as it might seem. You'll have all heard about the issues of cyberbullying, pornography, grooming, and gambling. That, for me, isn't the issue with technology. The issue with technology is having the stress of sending 70 Snapchat messages before I have my cocoa pops. That's not the stuff you read about in the paper. The most stressful app I have on my phone is WhatsApp, because I'm a part of about 9 parenting groups. And we're getting the Jimmy lost his jumper. What is it, PE day tomorrow? We do a collection for Mary, the SNA, whatever it is, and you get the thanks, thumbs up, you're great, Louise, fair play, Louise, you love it, But it's the life admin of trying to manage that that's hugely stressful for me. The Snapchat stuff about the streaks, like if you're trying to keep, you're familiar with Snapchat streaks, so you send an image of your foot or a wall or something, and then somebody else sends a picture of their foot on the wall, and it's every 24 hours you send this thing, if the streak goes up 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have a streak of like 400 days or something. But if you 24 hours pass and you forget to reply to a streak, the streak is gone. So these children are, I would find one of those stressful. These kids have 15 or 16 of those, 20 of them trying to, can you imagine them trying to keep on top of that all the time? And children are not socially, cognitively, or emotionally ready, capable of managing that level of stress. But it is everyone, and no one is immune. I use the example of frogs in a pond. If you had a pond and there was frogs and they were acting strangely, you take out the frogs and you have a look at them and see what is wrong with them individually, and you try and fix each frog. But after a while you'd say, maybe it's the pond, that's the problem. That for me is where we're at now. I don't think it's individuals, I think it's the pond. The pond is toxic with expectation, pressure, demand, pathology, all of that sort of stuff. And so the intervention level has to be at pond level, not frog level. And it's too easy to say it's the frog's problems, because from a government perspective, if you locate the problem in the individual, there's no responsibility to you to fix the society. You know, it's easier to build a clinic than to regenerate a disadvantaged area. You understand? So the sticky plants or stuff. And so we need to be saying, like, these are not young people that are struggling with resilience because they're weak or because they have some sort of, Gen Z sort of issue. It's because they're trying to exist in a pond that is drowning them in many ways. And Desmond Tutu has that saying, like, we need to stop pulling kids out of or pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in. And for me, that's kind of part of that problem. But most of the factors that contribute to sadness and worry are not biological ones. They are social and psychological. It absolutely is. So, of course, there's a role for biology in certain cases, but in 90% of cases, it's a psychological issue or a social one. So that means that where we intervene needs to be at the psychological or social heart, right? So we have natural physical needs like water, food, shelter, clean air. We also have natural psychological needs. And this is an important slide. If you try and listen to this one, or if you take anything out of this, maybe this is it. I love this. We need to feel like we belong, have meaning and purpose, feel that people see us and value us, and have a future that makes sense. If you just think about those four things, belonging, where do I achieve that? What is it? And there's a big difference between belonging and fitting in. Fitting in is changing myself to be accepted. Belonging is being accepted for who I am. So we need to create spaces that don't encourage fitting in, but spaces that create belonging. Does that make sense? The next thing, having meaning and purpose. So important to our sense of value, our sense of productivity, our sense of role, our sense of having function. Really, really important. And scrolling through TikTok just has no meaning and purpose to it. It's an absolutely empty task from that point of view. We need to feel that people see us and value us. In the absence of that, we will turn to social media audiences to get the recognition. My PhD was on online sharing, and that's what I found. The people who were sharing most prolifically were not trying to announce themselves, they were trying to find themselves. They were asking people to see me, see me, see me. And those metrics of that sort of stuff is really, it's a sugary hit of recognition, but it's not sustaining. It's like, people say, well, it helps me to feel better. And I'm saying, well, take-out crisps help me to feel less hungry, but I just can't live on it. Do you know what I mean? Nothing against take-out, like other brands. And so, a future that makes sense, that's the big one. Right? When we live in a world of AI, all that sort of stuff, and changing world, the impact of AI is going to be massive. And not just from the point of view of the dangerous stuff, but now we can see videos of the Queen in a UFC wrestling match, and we can see koala bears rescuing tigers from the, and you're going, it looks so real. But now we cannot believe our eyes. And if you can't believe your eyes, you can't believe video evidence, what can you believe? So our whole concept of trust is now in the balance. Do you know what I mean? And so I use the example of if your boyfriend had a row and the boyfriend comes back with the most beautiful apology you've ever heard. He's like, I understand I overstepped the mark there, I didn't consider your feelings, I've really learned from this experience, gone away, I've thought about it, done some work on myself, I understand where I went wrong now, I promise it will never happen again, you're important to me, and I want you to know that, and I will remind you of that every day. She's like, oh my gosh. And then she says, ChatGPT right there. And if you find out ChatGPT wrote it, the sincerity of that apology means nothing. Right? But let's say the boyfriend actually does go away and do all the work and says the exact same thing. And she says, ChatGPT wrote that. It's equally as problem. My son said the other day, there's no point in doing good work in school because people will assume it was ChatGPT. I don't put the effort in because of it. So the whole process of trying to make sense of effort, sincerity, authenticity has been thrown into the ether. What we know about children and child development is that reliability, trust, routine, predictability, safe, containing spaces is what allows them to grow. We have no trust in anything, and we're second guessing everything. Everything I get sent in, is that AI? I could say, it could be anything. But that's a frightening idea of where the next 10 years are going to go. We live in a machine that's moving us away from the values that keep us content and connected, which is that meaning, purpose, value, seen, respected, belonging. The next slide is the most important one for you here to hear and understand. Judah Commercy said, it is no sign of good health to be well adjusted to a sick society. It is no sign of good health to be well adjusted to a sick society. So if you're a person who thrives in this world, maybe you're not the healthy, fit ones. If you're someone who struggles with this world, maybe you're the healthy one. Does that make sense? What most people are doing isn't always the healthiest and most normal option. There's a difference between normal and normative, right? Normative is what most people do. Normal is the closest thing we can describe to what we probably should do. So it is normative to bring your phone into the toilet. It's not normal to do that, right? But from the point of view of this, if this becomes the dominating part of teenage culture, then this is where I need to be, and I don't fit into this world. We have to create a space for kids who don't want to be there. Where else do they go? You know, and I think that is important. So if you're struggling, it doesn't mean that you have a deficit or you're weak. It's because the expectations and pressures are too much. You don't lack resilience. It's just that the environment is too pressurized for everyone, and the resources needed to negotiate it are being depleted on a daily basis. I go back to my own teenage years. When I used to get off the bus, I used to go to the phone box, right? And I used to ring 3 times and hang up, right? It was my mum who had known that I was down there saying 20p, it was a strategy. So she didn't know I was there. But it took about 15 minutes for her to drive down. I grew up in a place called Brittis in County Dublin. It's between Blessington and Tala. And it was about 15 minutes drive. So she would come down and collect me and go back. But in that 15 minutes waiting for her to come, there was nothing. I didn't have as me and those books, school books and a wall, right? So I didn't have anything to distract me. And in those moments, that's when I thought about my life. It's when I thought, does that girl like me? What do I want to be? Would I like to be a pilot? But you're afraid of heights. You're trying to work through it. But it's that space of reflection. You know, we didn't have mindfulness in the 90s because we didn't need it. We had that. If that was today, I wouldn't have that space. I wouldn't have had that space and time to do it. The second thing that we're missing is we are now seeing the first generation of children who did not grow up on the street, the road, or the green. And that's huge, right? Because that's where you learn everything. You learn about resilience, disappointment, frustration, conflict resolution, all of those things without adult intervention. You're in that space, you're learning all these things. And the social atrophy or gaps that are created from children not having that experience is phenomenal. I go back to my own shit. So I was one of those kids during the summer, head off at 9 o'clock in the morning and come back at 9 o'clock at night. I ate in whatever house had food, right? And that was fine. And I would say that was the most important part of my childhood, and I'm really grateful for it, and it made me who I am today. So it stands to reason, Coleman, if that's the case, you obviously allow your own children to do that now. Well, no, right? I do not let them off at 9 o'clock in the morning, come back at 9 o'clock at night. But if it's something that I felt so positive about, why don't I? Right? And I'm trying to think about this. I think about it in the terms of when I was going off on my bike, I lived in a village where everybody knew who I was and I knew everybody else. So I was never more than 50 meters away from someone who, if I was in trouble, I could have got help from. And if I was up to no good, my mother would definitely have known before I got home. There were 50 sets of eyes making sure that I wasn't. Right? So that village allows the independence to happen. Where I live now, I know my neighbour on my right kind of well. Know the guy on the left a little bit. He's a bit odd and he's nice, but you just don't know him very well or see him. And so when my children go out the road and turn right, there's no eyes watching them. No. They're on their own, right? So for me, it's much better to have them here. We also grew up in a time in the 90s, parents now, through the clerical abuse scandals, all that stuff about Fringe reports and all this sort of stuff. We also witnessed Philip Kearns, Jamie Bolger, Madeleine McCann, right? Those completely shifted our whole perspective on child safety. And everyone became so... The safety stats are much better now than they were in the 80s and 90s, but we assume that they're worse. Does that make sense? Because of those experiences. The other side of it is, the same time as that fear was happening, technology came along and said, here's the thing that you can entertain your children at home and they never have to leave the house. And you went, happy days. I can keep them entertained and I know they're here and there's proximity and all of that sort of stuff. And so what we had was a move from a play-based childhood to a screen-based childhood. And what we're seeing now is the cost of that. Children unable to make conversations. And I teach in a third level university, and I'd always say the 18 to 30s are a good indicator of where the 12 to 18s are going, unless we do something different. And the 12 to 18s are a good indicator of where the 4 to 12 do. You look at the stage ahead, And I teach communication skills. And my God, it's hard. They're trained to be mental health nurses, so they need to have really advanced skills of communication. The ability to listen and tell a story are things that we have to teach now to 19, 20-year-olds. Teach them how to listen, teach them how to tell a story. Because those situations, they're just not there. Those skill sets aren't there. And so, from a screen-based strategy, and that's not because they were unwilling to learn that, they were unable to, because those things weren't built into it. So when we see people struggle with sadness and worries, they're malfunction, they're signals. We need to listen to them, not try and bypass them. So for the last 10 years, the most common issue in my therapy room is anxiety. We live in this highly anxious culture. But looking at that 18 to 30 group and saying, well, what's the next pressing thing? Is it still anxiety? It's not. Loneliness is fast becoming the most important and common thing that we hear about in the therapy rooms. Loneliness. 18 to 25-year-olds with loneliness. That's unbelievable. I work in a college campus. I work in SETU Waterford. 5 o'clock, campus is dead. Nobody around. Everyone's gone home. The amount of cans of Monster and Panadol that are sitting in front of me in the lecture hall is getting less and less every day. They're not coming out, they're not. And the idea of that social atrophy is that they're really struggling. They have an appetite for connection but don't know how to do it. And it's really worrying because we are the loneliest society in human history. This is why you guys come in so importantly into this. This is studies done years ago by John Casapio. How many close friends do you have if you turn to in crisis? For years the answer was 5. Now the most common answer is none. 40% of Americans agreed with the statement, nobody knows me well. And it's not about how many people like your posts, but how many people in your life could you call upon to mind your cat? How many people could you call upon if you're really ill and you're lying on the couch to run to the chemist and get a prescription for you? They're the levels of connection that I'm talking about now, because we can feel lonely in a crowd. We exist as a species, not because we're the biggest, strongest, or fastest, because we were so good at banding together. And that's a really important part. You separate a bee from a hive, it doesn't know what it needs to do. If we lived in the savannah and we went off on our own, we'd get eaten. So we need to, the idea of the tribe, the village is crucially important. And the tribe is really important from the point of view of mental health problems as well. Have you heard of the story of Rat Park? Do you want to talk about that? So Rat Park is a study done on addiction. So they put a rat in a cage and they put water and heroin at either side of the cage. The rat tasted the water, tasted the heroin, preferred the heroin, and back to the heroin, back to the heroin, back to the heroin, died. So that was a formulation of addiction is a physical substance that causes an addiction. That informed our ideas of addiction for centuries, decades. And a guy called Bruce Alexander came up and said, this experiment is flawed. You just put a rat in a cage on its own with a drug and water. That's not representative of life. So he built a thing called Rat Park. So you put the rats in with turn wheels and food and other rats that they could talk to and have sex with and eat and all that sort of stuff. And they put the heroin in the water. 14% of the rats took the heroin, the other 85 didn't. Which proves that addiction is a social problem as much as it is a physiological one. And if we think about that, that's why we need to value the social world. It's really important in terms of what's making us anxious. And our social world is really scary because what messages we're sending down the line, and we have to own this as the adults, right? Remember fear of missing out, the FOMO stuff. Big one at the moment is JOMO, which is the joy of missing out, right? And this is glorifying avoidance. And if you're one of these people, I'm sorry, but you're not my friend anymore. We now celebrate when people cancel plans. Yes, I don't have to go to that. That is such an unhealthy message for children to see you do. Stop doing that. Even if you are pleased about it, pretend you're not, right? The issue, like, what message is that sending? Like, the idea, and the psychological self-esteem movement had a lot to answer for here. Through the 80s and 90s, well, put down your boundaries, don't let everybody be selfish, blah, blah, blah. We've taken that way too far. Like, if you think about when I was growing up, people used to come to our house all the time. Not that my mother was delighted to see every one of them, but they arrived, and there was no announcement of it. Now, like, my children, we've lived in our house since 2023, for 2 years. I'd say we've had 5 visitors to that house in that time. And those visitors did not come on spec. They gave you 2 weeks' notice. so you could do the skirt and towards the back. They went to go have a look there, the toothbrush. But because we formalise socialisation in such a way, children don't know how to have informal conversations either. My daughter, and we were in the takeaway about 2 months ago, and her friend was over there with her family, and she was over with us. And I would go over to Annie Mae, she said, "No, she's busy." I said, "Just go on." And they came home, she put on the headset with Roblox, and she's like, "Hey, Annie Mae, sorry that you're around." And I'm like, "What?" But we've created that. You can't approach people. And that thing about, God, if someone turned up to my house, I'd be offended without them telling me and all that. It's a really toxic message, lads. We need to cop on to ourselves with that. I think people coming out of COVID was all very trendy to be, oh, I love social distancing, because I'm so important. Well, you're not, right? Get over yourself, stop sending that message, invite people over to your house, turn up to people's houses, even if you don't think they want there. Give a sense of social fluidity. Because if we put in those barriers, we can't expect teenagers, children, to buy into a model that they can't see. Does that make sense? I genuinely think we need to manage that. The other thing is shared experience, which is where your groups come into this as well. Brett Ford did a brilliant study where he gave these participants an hour a day and he gave them resources. And he said, spend an hour a day doing something that makes you happy. And he did it in Taiwan, Russia, and Japan, and US. It worked in Russia, Taiwan, and Japan, it didn't work in the US. Any idea why? The Americans tried to do something for themselves, where the other countries did something with other people. So the American went for a massage, or they went for a plunge, or whatever it was, whereas the others went and did something with other people. The shared experience is crucial, lads, right? If I went and I was down the restaurant or down the coffee shop, and I saw, I don't know, Ryan Gosling came into the coffee shop, and I saw it on my own, I'd be like, I saw Ryan Gosling. But let's say myself and Dennis were down there and we saw Ryan Gosling, we would tell that story for decades. And we didn't tell it, we'd say he sat down and chatted to us for 20 minutes. But from the point of view of the shared experience is a completely different one to an experience you have on your own. And we're underestimating that because we're having this individualized belief of happiness. And this is the rise of individualism. And this is the big issue. And this is really technology is driving this agenda. Think about iPhone, selfie, it's all about me and nothing about we. And that's why, again, this loneliness problem is so much more about looking after ourselves. And the loss of the tribe, it's important to remember, again, that this is, if we look at a clock and look at the technological evolution as representing since we've been on the earth, this big shift in our whole society is about 0.0000001 of a tiny millisecond. Like, this is tiny space of time to shift a whole evolutionary process around how we communicate and how we go on. Here's hyper-individualism culture. The first half of the 90s was 146 weeks in the UK charts when bands were #1, right? Erasure, Wet Wet Wet, New Kids on the Block. The first 5 years of this decade, from 2019 to 24, there's 3 weeks where a band was #1. One was the Live Lounge All-Stars, which was all individual artists over COVID singing a Foo Fighters song. The second one was the Beatles re-released a hit. And the third one, holding the torch for bands in the 2025s, are Little Mix, right? What I'm saying with that is, if children were to become a solo artist rather than a band, I used to go to schools and say, how many kids in here in a band? You'd have 40 hands in a year. By going now, none of them are in a band. The band is gone. We're a song culture, not an album culture. Because it's all about picking what we want rather than being exposed. Do you see how that reflects society? So what are the challenges for youth work? We're raising children in a world that's emotionally louder, but relationally quieter. Emotionally louder, relationally quieter. Relationships are key. Nothing can devastate you like a relationship. Think of the saddest moments in your life. Most likely was a breakup, a bereavement, a loss of some description of a relationship. Nothing has the capacity to devastate us in that way. Flip side, nothing can help us recover like a relationship. Does that make sense? Young people come into the inpatient units for decades and they've been for long admissions, 3 months, 4 months, and you'd ask them going home, what was the thing that was most important while you were here? They never say the medicine, they never say the sessions with Coleman, they never say the doctors, they say the other young people. That's the connection, that's the vehicle for how we manage things is through relationships. So we need to see emotional loudness needs to be accompanied by relationship loudness in the same respect. We move from the play-based childhood to the screen-based childhood. We're seeing increasing anxiety and emotional dysregulation, and we're seeing fragmented attention and overstimulation. And the attention span thing is really an issue, especially if you're trying to get somebody involved in something. The idea that children tend to give up on things much, much easier. And I do the same. Like, do you remember when you went to Extravision and you brought home the film and you were sitting there going 20 minutes in, this is a bit of a slow burner, but we're here now. Now you're like, oh, I don't like that, I don't like if the credits aren't too long, we'll swap it out, right? So you learn perseverance. It's not innate. You have to learn it through building up the perseverance muscle. If young people and children don't have that need, they won't learn how to do it. Like learning to wait. When I was a young person, I used to go to my granny's house, and she used to tell me about these people that died, who I never knew. And I sat, I smiled, and I nodded next time, because I knew there was a custard cream and a Kiora coming at the end. That's perseverance, but it's also how to work a room. It's prononcing someone, it's playing to someone. That has helped me through my working life phenomenally, because I know how to be in a room with people I don't like or find interesting. It's a skill set. I don't think children have that now. It's like, this is boring, and they want out. They want an option out of it. And even when they try things and go, I don't like that, or I'm not good at it, you're saying, it's golf. It takes a lifetime to be good at it. And they go once and they go, oh, it's not for me. That kind of quick judgment on things makes engagement really difficult. The less unstructured play is a real problem. We need to bring that back. The over-reliance on digital communication and pandemic isolation. They have difficulty reading social cues, and they avoid group settings. That's the thing, right? When I've said it to my son loads of times, if there was a youth club or a youth group or something, would you go and do it? He's like, no way, I wouldn't. Why? He said, I wouldn't like it, or I'd be too nervous, or I'd be too anxious. And I'd say, when you go, you will be anxious. And for the first couple of times you'll be anxious, but then you'll grow to like it. And I say, I'm sure there's people say, oh, I never like skiing or something. But then they go and they find, you have to try something to know whether you like it or not. And you don't try it once. Like, if you only played golf once and went out, and you'd be shit, excuse my language, you'd be crap at it, right? So it wouldn't be really enjoyable. You'd have to go back again and again and again and practice it. And then it would be something that you'd love and you'd be able to depend upon. But the idea of our culture being these kind of sample tests, and then you have to persist with these things. And I think when I have a small sample size of my kid, he's saying, I would find that too intimidating, I wouldn't like it. He has all these preconceived ideas around what that is. And for me, that's marketing. There's something we need to change the brand marketing of this, that this is something you want to do. Cool. And one of the models I would use sometimes is cool camps, right? So my daughter goes GA training and she doesn't like it. I'm trying to get her to like it, she just doesn't like it. She hates the competitive side, they talk about matches and the Division 2 this, and she's quite good, and that makes it worse because there's pressure on her to do these sorts of things, and she's totally disinterested in that way. But she likes cool camps, because when she goes to cool camps, the people who are running cool camps are like Quiva and Saoirse, who are IT students in Carlow, and they're like 19 and they're trendy, and she likes talking about them. And so she'll run into cool camps because there's a relatability. When she's doing the soccer, it's another parent my age who's Brendan from down the road who's telling her how to solo with both feet. So there's something about that model of cool camps that we, almost if we had aspiring youth involved in these things, maybe that would make it. I know my teenage son would probably be more likely to go to a group that was run by 19 and 20-year-olds than 49 and 50-year-olds. Does that make sense? That's just an idea. I just think that cool camp model is interesting. So how are the solutions? Are they well-being classes and worksheets, mindfulness classes? Are these the solution to the problem? They are certainly not. Peer mentoring and opportunities to gather. Opportunities to gather. We need to, and again, I don't think teenagers have a space to gather. If they're hanging around in spaces in more than two people, there's an assumption they're antisocial or they're up to something. And they feel that. And that's a hangover from COVID. Do you remember we described them as vectors of disease and all during that time? Children used to be, when they were in shops, people used to jump away from them and all that sort of stuff. Like, that has left a scar. Like, I can see it in how they don't feel welcome in many parts of society. And if they don't feel welcome, we can't be surprised when they all migrate online as the only adult-free space that they have. The other side of things, they're overscheduled. They go to football and soccer, they have ballet, they have all this sort of stuff. Oh, ballet, no, we're not getting guitar lessons or something, all adult-led. You know, from the point of view of that there's no real space for them. And people say, oh, my son is very social. He does soccer on Monday, GH. I coach an under 16 soccer team. That's not a social gathering. Right? They have 5 minutes at the start to talk to each other, and then we're like, oh, drills, lads. Except if they're chatting, we separate them, and they're doing the drills and doing the matches, and then they have about 4 minutes to chat when they walk to their cars. That's not, there's no space there to shoot the breeze, to find out who you are. It's a structured space that's competitive and it's taken in and all that sort of stuff. So I wouldn't count those as social gatherings. They're not opportunities to gather. We need more of those spaces. The shorter attention span, like their digital nutrition is so poor with the fast-paced stuff, but it also means that young people pass judgment far earlier, and the skill of perseverance is lost because it never needs to be practiced. So we might need to have short, varied activities to engage them, but we might need to build in movement and sensory breaks and things like that, but we have to encourage boredom and tolerance. And that's a very difficult thing to do when you're trying to engage someone and bore them at the same time. You know, but it's more about fulfillment instead of gratification. That's a really important distinction. Gratification, press that, get that. Fulfillment, working at something, and then getting to the end, right? We talk about the pursuit of happiness. Familiar with that term? However, I would flip that and say the happiness of the pursuit, right? It's not, having things doesn't make you happy, getting things does. Think of Lego. Lego is, the enjoyment is that not looking at the finished bit. You do nothing with it, it goes on the shelf. The important part is putting it together. The fulfillment of the effort and the engagement and the process that leads to the happy moment. So the idea of that pursuit and that fulfillment and putting effort and meaning into something is really, really important. The rise in additional needs is a consideration. More children with autistic spectrum disorder, ADHD, anxiety and depression, which is a real challenge because you've got things like sensory difficulties, emotional dysregulation, all that sort of stuff. Of course, we can try and do things like having visual schedules, quiet zones, staff training on neurodiversity if we can. We also need normative activities, that it doesn't become a place solely for those children. And I think that is a risk, because then you involve another bit of exclusion of children who don't have needs. And it's very difficult because the spaces for those children, like in the sports clubs and things like that are very competitive, there isn't a space for them, and so I think families are looking at things like speech and drama and youth clubs and as a space that they might be accepted, or scouts and things like that. But it is important that we maintain a space for children who don't have those needs too. And I know that's probably a controversial thing to say, but I don't mean it in that way. I just think that, like, here's the thing. Say, take children's sport, right? They have elite pathways, and all the children's sport is very, very heavy. No matter what level you're in, it's a commitment. Okay. Oh Jesus, why didn't I? Okay, right, scrap that. There's an issue with like you have to train Monday, Tuesday, you have to be matches on Wednesday and all that stuff. There's no five-a-side culture for teenagers, right? Five-a-side is, there's a text goes around on a Monday, and on around tomorrow, comes up, you go, you run, you go, you get a bid, you play, you're competitive for the hours, you go home. There's no commitment, right? That's not because you're not competitive. You can be competitive in five-a-side for sure. But maybe we don't have a competitive crisis, we have a commitment crisis. We're demanding too much commitment, which is turning children off. Then we have kind of special needs groups, which are brilliant, for young people with additional needs in sports, and they have special teams. But what about the kids in the middle, who are not for the elite stuff, but they're not special needs, they just want to play five-a-side. We need to create a space for those kids as well. And I won't go into this because I've gone far too much into that. Let me see. Yeah, done that. Yeah, we need to meet young people where they're at, not where we want them to be. Youth clubs matter because they're safe, non-judgmental spaces. They're a chance to rebuild friendships. The barriers can be social anxiety, sometimes lack of transport access, and it can sometimes be perceived as not cool. Those are things that we need to kind of manage by maybe putting outreach, support, and low pressure entry points, drop-ins. You were saying about when you put the idea of the thing, you said you can do it if you want. We'll pick you up if you do the play. Was it a play in the competition talent show? That's far more, like, if somebody says to me, will you bring out the bins, please? I will do it. If someone says bring out the bins, please, I probably won't. You know, how you're asked to do something, if there's a demand in there, it creates pressure so having those low pressure entry points would be really important. Being a consistent adult presence. Do not underestimate the value of that. I would say when you're dealing with teenagers, just remember two things. Approach with empathy and curiosity. That's what they need. They want you to be interested, and they want you to be empathetic to their position. And it's not about being at the same level as them. The parenting Everest, I remember one kid saying to me, she said, my mom doesn't get me, but she's trying. And I thought, okay, that's what I want. If someone said that about me, I'd be, right, I'm retiring, mic drop, I'm out. Because it's effort. It's effort, you recognize effort. And that's the idea that young people do actually value that hugely. Consistent present. And co-regulation is just by being regulated yourself and helping them with that. Modeling healthy boundaries, facilitating them to gather and then stepping back. And it was a bit like you said after COVID, they just maybe want to chill. They want that opportunity to spread. Leave that. They don't come to you and say, we're bored now, we want something different. But allowing them that space, there's value in nothingness. You have to start valuing nothingness because that's what they don't have. They don't have a nothingness space because they're overscheduled and they're filling their time. Check-in rituals would be good and one-to-one mentoring where possible. Create a relational culture where there's vulnerability, empathy, curiosity, all of these things that they want that they're not going to see within the TikTok world. We have to be the counter-narrative to that. Emotional literacy, you can do that. But again, I would say that's an addendum to certain young people. Encourage autonomy, let them lead projects. Anti-bullying strategies in schools. If they are designed for the young people, they're far more effective than if they're designed by board of management. You impose a bullying strategy on a kid's school, they're not going to have any ownership over it, whereas if they're involved in creating it themselves, there tends to be a bit more ownership in that way. Celebrate effort, not outcome, and learn from the anti-bullying initiatives which are about being young people led. But maybe we're overcomplicating it. Here's a question. What do you think is the best thing you can do to improve your mental health? Research backed up, outstandingly evidence-based. Shout it out. What are we doing? One thing, one activity.
Nature.
No? No?
Do something for someone else.
Who said that? You ruined my slide deck. I was so confident you were going to get it wrong. Here's the thing. To volunteer or join a choir. Why is that the most foolproof way of improving mental health? Because the reason for this is these activities provide shared meaning and purpose, an opportunity to be of service to others. The shared meaning and purpose, why a choir? Because you're working on something, it's coming together, there's a crescendo part of it, but also it's camouflaged performance. You can be in a choir and go, because there's no spotlight on you, so there's no pressure. You have the camouflage of performance. It's belonging at its best. Do you know what I mean? The opportunity to be of service to others. Children and young people need this, right? Go into any Easton's, you'll see any number of self-help books. I'll challenge you to find one help others book. They don't exist, right? Young people, when you help someone, there's nothing better than helping. You're doing this work. You know it. If somebody says to me, can you open that jar? And I go, pop. I feel like a Thor. It's a privilege for me to do that. I feel great. And, you know, but when somebody says to you, thank you, and they mean it, there's no dopamine hit. There's no TikTok video could hit close to that. That is the idea that we need to almost pollinate the volunteerism or the service or the acts of service to others, because that's the stuff that creates the village. The village is not about taking. It's about contributing and taking. There's a cost to being a villager. You have to give into it in order to get out of it. That's how the system works. It's not just an empty kind of self-replenished support. It's a dynamic. And if young people get that, and I think also the idea of helping others has become very performative. Julia, that sort of, I'm here if you're alone, but just don't cause my house. It's like, but it can be a little bit like that. And there's a kind of, I give €1 to a homeless person, but I take a picture of me giving the €1 to the homeless person. It's kind of, okay, the homeless guy gets the euro, but that wasn't the kind of purpose of that thing. So we need to clarify what genuine, authentic, and sincere connections are. And it is about helping out each other and helping out other people. Whether it's going to, and it's not picking up rubbish, right? That's not, I know that's a very good volunteering thing, but something a bit more interactive would really help, I think, in many ways. I have like 100 extra slides, so I'm not going to go into those because I'm out of time. I'm a few minutes, okay. So the problem is we need to do this all together. We can't solve loneliness on our own. And the issue here is, I have these 22, 23-year-olds, lads, girls coming into me saying, I'm really lonely, what will I do when I have no option for them? I can go to a hiking, book club, there's no, what else? Bar dating apps, which are incredibly problematic, and I don't need to direct them down that route, there isn't a space for those young people to go or to do, or to, especially the older ones. But if we're trying to make sure that the ones that are teenagers now don't end up there, we need to really emphasize those connections, those gatherings, and those relationships where they are now. And here's the thing, tech companies want you to be virtually dependent and physically distant. Think about gaming, old school gaming. Playing together, shouldering each other, get stuck in. This is modern day gaming. If we were playing in the 90s, we'd go to the same house, we had 2 joysticks. If my son wants to play with his friends, they all have to go to their own house, put on their headsets, and play. That is not by accident. That's the technological design. They want us to be as virtually dependent and as physically disconnected. So that's what we're fighting against. The groups and the gatherings and that sort of stuff are trying to fight against Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley could develop a socialization app in the morning where I get a thing saying, Coleman, tennis is down in Costa having a coffee. Do you want to go to meet and send them a notification? And we go down and have a coffee. They don't want that because when we have the coffee, we put our phones down. And that's less time on the screen. So they don't want that. So the idea, and all of that sort of profiling, I haven't even gone near any of that, but, okay, I'll give you, sorry. Do you ever think your phone is listening to you?
Yeah.
It's not, right? But it is, right? So let's say, for example, me and Dennis are having that coffee, and our phones are in proximity to each other, right? The algorithm knows that, and it takes note of that. So let's say we're talking about dog food, I don't know, something random, right? And so when I'm coming away from the conversation with Dennis going, I must check that dog food thing that he asked me about. I say, check the dog food thing. It'll start giving me ads for dog food, but it'll also give it to Dennis. Because there's a presumption that when I searched it after we met, that's what we were talking about. Does that make sense? So when you think the algorithm is just your Google searches, it is not. If you check your phone at 2:30 every morning, the algorithm knows you have sleep problems. So you're going to get ads for pillows, mattresses, lavender, calendars, all that. So the sentiment analysis goes so much further than that. We think about the children who've had phones since they were 9, 10 years of age. Imagine how sophisticated the algorithm is about them. The algorithm knows you better than your best friend, because your best friend doesn't read your WhatsApp messages at 3 in the morning. Doesn't do what I mean? And you notice on WhatsApp the little circular thing down the bottom, the AI thing, that just came as part of an update? Everything you're putting into WhatsApp is being sucked into that. ChatGPT wasn't designed to give you information, it was to get information about you. So every question that you're asking ChatGPT is being analysed into that algorithm. And that's a real worry because a lot of teenagers are using ChatGPT for emotional advice. And ChatGPT is a narcissist. It's never going to disagree with you. If you say, my boyfriend did this, it's going to go, dump him. You know, it's like, you have a great question, you're better than that. Which is going to be deeply problematic as well. Anyway, I don't end on that. That's the comparative. He was delighted
go back
with
for
his
ice
life
cream.
problem,
Yes.
I watched Bosco till I was 14. Not because I did that event today, but just because it's the only thing I've done. Right? And now of all these things, I go to bed more times having watched nothing. As I go to the menu, someone said, that's good as that, actually. Right? There, childhood is not an apprenticeship for adulthood. We need to get out of that mindset. Parents sending good Gael school, you're going to do music because you get CAO points, we're going to send you here, we're going to send you there, you're going to go to football because you can be a premiership player and be my pension, or whatever it is. You need to get out of that. And a lot of that is adult issues, not children's issues. You never see a headline in the Irish Independent, 2 9-year-olds punch the heads off each other in a cool campaign. It's the adults, it's the coaches, and they need to have those role models. Don't matter. I'm going to flip it right away to the end. Oh my god. Oh, that's funny. My wife asked me why I spoke so softly in the house. I said I was afraid Mark Zuckerberg was listening. She laughed, I laughed, Alexa laughed. Oh yeah, I'm going to do the solutions, right? The solutions are delay the introduction of smartphones. Just buy time until the child is at some level a sense of themselves. Right? Children are born in discovery mode, so they're going around searching about things. And then as they get older, they go from discovery mode to defensive mode. And defensive mode is, what are people thinking about what I'm wearing, and they get conscious of labels and all that sort of stuff. As soon as you put a phone into the hands of a child, you flick the switch from discovery to defensive. And if you shrink childhood to that level, the longer they spend in defensive mode, the more compromised they will begin. So delaying ownership does nothing other than extend their time in discovery mode. All you're trying to do is buy time, so that by the time they get it, they'll have enough of a sense of self to be able to manage that space better. Social media restrictions, we need to do that, obviously. Increase parental and school regulation around phones. Encouraging outdoor unstructured play. This needs to come in. We need to bring this in somewhere. Outskirts, schools, whatever it might be. The techs obviously have a responsibility. Collective action is important. So here we go. Oh yeah. We need to rise up and reclaim the values that sustain us and engage less with the things that drain us. So much stuff out there stopping us. The stuff that sustains us is being with other people, connecting, having that vitality, doing things for other people, having a meaningful, fulfilling space. Remember I went back to belonging? Feeling seen and heard, meaning and purpose, and a future that makes sense. If you can provide something of that to any child or teenager you're working with, you're doing some amazing work by just being there to try and help them to see that. And so I'll leave you on this. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. Let's bring back the village. Let's bring back the groups. And let's bring back what's important. This is a traditional solution to a contemporary problem. And there's a lot of responsibility on you guys to do this, but it's something you can't shirk that responsibility. It's too important. And anything I can do to support you guys to do that, I'd be more than happy to do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.